In my teaching in person and online, I talk a lot about the importance of posture, mind-body oneness, and releasing excess tension. All the different elements that are completely necessary to make violin playing as effortless and enjoyable as possible. So today, let's talk a little bit about mobility and flexibility. Hi, I'm Ariadne, and this is Mindful Strings, where I help you transform your violin playing through the principles of the Alexander Technique and the Russian School of Violin. I teach violin full-time at my private studio here in Boston, Massachusetts, and this is an online resource for anyone wanting to learn at home. I have created a few free resources for you guys, so check out the links down in the description box below. One is a pre-practice routine for releasing tension. One is a 15-minute practice session that's guided, and there's also a link down there for Scratchy to Smooth, which is my course on how to make beautiful sound on the violin. So one of the issues that ties into excess tension, which almost everyone picking up the violin has, is mobility and flexibility. So the question of mobility is about joints, right? And flexibility is about the stretchiness of our muscles. However, they go hand in hand, because if your muscles hold too much tension, if they're used to being kind of in a contracted position, the joints will not be able to be very mobile at all. And where this comes to be very important, where it's the most visible, let's put it that way, is the bow hand and the left hand. Even though there's lots of muscles that are connected throughout the body, and what you do in your back and neck and shoulders will affect what you're doing in your hands, the symptoms will appear in your hands. So even if you have the right left hand setup, let's say your wrist is straight, the fingers look right over the string, if you squeeze the thumb and the index finger around the neck, you will have a lot less mobility in the joints in the fingers. And so if you don't squeeze, you should be able to kind of wiggle your fingers, and it's very important to be able to move them from the first row of knuckles. So one of the exercises, and I go through this in the Scratchy to Smooth course actually, is working before you even start playing to get a little bit more familiar with the fine movements in both of your hands so that your fingers can be free to play. And so when you pick up the violin, you check your neck, that your neck is released and you're not squeezing down, just using the weight of your head and the arm to support the instrument. Your shoulder, you want to make sure you're not raising your shoulder, and that you're holding your violin with just enough muscular involvement, that you don't drop the instrument, but not so much as if it weighs 1,000 pounds. And then being able to hold it lightly, glide the thumb on the side of the neck, and wiggle your fingers. So pulling the fingers back, dropping them in the string. Pulling the fingers back, dropping them in the string. See if you can do that, and use a mirror so you could really pay attention to if you notice anything else getting involved, like are you changing the way your wrist is shaped, or if you're dropping the violin and your elbow starts touching your body. And when it comes to the bow hand, I always talk about wanting a very light, kind of neutral shape of the hand. Just comes to the bow, and there's very little work involved in the hand itself. The fingers are very light. Your thumb and middle finger are primarily the kind of the balancing point of the bow, where you're holding the bow, and then everything else is able to be very free. So if you spend a lot of time sitting and typing on the computer, or riding a bicycle or driving a car, you are probably used to gripping with your hands a lot more than is necessary. So one of the things that I recommend is that you do a light stretch before you play, just to kind of bring a little bit more awareness into your arms and your hands, and spend a few minutes here and there practicing those little movements and little stretches, pulling the fingers back and making sure that you are not approaching holding the bow and the violin with this kind of gripping motion. So one of the stretches that can work well is just bringing your palms together and raising your elbows, and go very gently. If anything hurts or feels particularly tight, slow down. And while you're here, of course, making sure that nothing else is getting overly involved. So letting the shoulders move as you breathe, letting the ribcage move as you breathe, allowing the neck to be free, your whole back to lengthen and widen. Feel the floor under your feet. You can shift your weight from foot to foot a little bit. Releasing the legs, releasing the glutes, all just while doing this one simple stretch here. You can then stretch out your arm and gently pull your hand towards you while it's facing down. Again, very gently. Don't try to go extreme here at all. Go to the other side. And notice if one side is tighter than the other. You know, we have a lot of tension usually accumulated in the forearms. And then you can do this as well. It's kind of similar to what we were doing before. Here, I'll stand this way. Gently pulling the fingers towards you. And then, you know, kind of stretching and sticking your fingers out and kind of tightening your hands as much as you can open, and then let them kind of droop and relax. And then again, open them and feel like I can definitely feel my right hand is a little bit tighter. I'm right hand dominant, so it makes sense. And then kind of let them droop. See if you can just let your hands hang. You'd be surprised at how many people have trouble releasing their hands and just giving me the floppy hand. Because floppy hand, the ability to do this is very important. In fact, you can even drop your arms and kind of do the droopy hand that way too. So when we, you know, set up, you can lift your arms as if you're going to play, you know. Let your hands just be very, very relaxed. And so for the bow hand, just coming back to the right side for a second, one of the things that is helpful is practicing without holding the bow, this movement of pushing something away and then bringing the arm back. I'm doing that at a roughly 45-degree angle from myself, from my center. And the hand, the wrist here leads, and the hand is kind of like fabric. It takes shape of that turn. I think of it as fabric underwater. So you want the hand to open up and the fingers to kind of straighten. And then when the wrist goes up, everything kind of softens and curls and goes up this way. And at this this turning point here is when you want to make sure that the first row of knuckles flattens out. So one of the biggest things that I notice in my students, and if you look in the mirror, you might notice this too, is that when you're playing, even if your bow hold is set up correctly, if the hand shape doesn't change, and if you see this row of knuckles sticking out kind of in the same way, whether you're at the frog or at the tip, this is something to look out for. Now, I'm not saying that you won't see this at all when you watch a professional, you know, amazing artist play. Different hands, you know, work out different ways of coping, and I have seen not a whole lot of movement in the knuckles in some violinists that get away with it, but that is not the easiest path, and I think we ought to find the way that is most efficient for us instead of kind of climbing uphill all the time. So play around with this idea of soft hands on both sides, doing light stretches, and kind of paying attention and noticing where does it feel tight. And the way you can bring this into your daily life is when you are driving, can you bring attention to your hands holding the steering wheel and just notice, am I squeezing the steering wheel? Can I hold it lighter? Can I hold it a little bit lighter and release my shoulders, release my neck instead of kind of getting really involved in it? And keeping all of your attention where your eyes are, which is on the road, but having a little bit of the awareness in your body as well, and just releasing that excess tension. Let me know down in the comments below what you noticed while going through these exercises and what you feel maybe getting in the way of your hands being free in your daily life. Happy mindful practicing, and I'll see you next time.